Whew. What's up, everybody? Trying to wait for a couple more people to come through, but let's get this thing started. So, thank you all for joining today. We're going to do something a little different on Chopping It Up with MoAD. This week, we're actually inviting back one of our former guests, Elle Simone. And, you know, I think a lot about the role of mentoring and skill sharing and how these are such important tools for helping people who have been historically marginalized and kind of prevented from being fully having access to a lot of the different fields within food media. And I'm thinking about things like food photography, food styling, prop styling, you know, these type of careers that oftentimes it's about your network. It's about working with the talented food photographer or food stylist or prop stylist, shadowing, you know, being mentored by them. And so I want to do everything that I can in order to help to break down some of these barriers and just create a little more transparency about how this stuff works. So that's why I wanted to have Elle Simone back. Elle is certainly one of the most talented food stylist, among many other things. She's a multi-hyphenate. And so I want to invite Elle in. But first of all, I want to first thank you for showing up. I know there are a lot of things you could be doing right now. So I really appreciate you joining this conversation. If you don't know, my name is Bryant Terry, and I am the permanent chef in residence at MoAD, the Museum of the African Diaspora in San Francisco, where I create programming at the intersection of food, farming, health, art, culture, Blackness, all those things. So I'm going to read Elle's short bio. She has a long bio. She has a really long bio, but we're not going to get too deep into that today. You can certainly check out her social media handles afterwards. But let me read you this. Elle Simone is executive editor / inclusion leader at America's Test Kitchen. She's also a food stylist for Cook's Country, an on-screen test cook for America's Test Kitchen, and host of an upcoming podcast. No, that podcast is here. This is an older bio. Check out Elle's podcast, The Walk-In. Brilliant, amazing. So happy that I got a chance to be a guest. Elle also works to boost America Test Kitchen's diversity efforts and promote a culture of inclusion with specific focus on recruiting, mentorship, and retention. As a founder of She Chef Incorporated, a professional networking organization and social enterprise, Elle provides mentoring to women chefs of color pursuing culinary arts as a career. With her creative eye for telling a story with food and her unique contribution to the dialogue surrounding women in business, Elle has appeared on the Food Network Magazine, the Cooking Channel, the Katie Couric Show, CBS, ABC's The Chew, Bravo's Chef Roebland Company, and many other media appearances. Elle's been featured in stories in Boston Globe, Forbes, Eater, and on the Tom Joyner Morning Show and NPR. Before I invite Elle in, I want to say thank you to Kaiser Permanente, who's been our sponsor for the Chef in Residence program at MoAD since we started. We appreciate your support, and we appreciate the mission aligned, values aligned work that you're doing. So let's invite Elle in.
Hi, y'all. Hi, Bryant.
What's up, Elle? How are you?
Good. How are you?
I'm doing well. I will typically have like a little reggae on the background when I'm doing these things, but I had to put on the new Busta Rhymes because
You,
I
you,
know that.
I was about to say, I prefer hip hop all day.
Have you
You
heard
know
that new
me.
Busta Rhymes?
I have not heard it. I was actually watching maybe like 2 weeks ago him making the video, so I was really excited about it. This week, I don't know. I kind of, I do like hiatuses, from like social media. Like I might tip in and tip out, but I take long breaks. So I like to do that because then when I come back, it's a lot to catch up on, like I gotta space it out. So
I
I'm gonna
feel
check it
you.
out. I'm gonna check it out tonight.
No, I feel you. That on a kind of radical self care tip, I've been having moments where I'm just like, you know what? I don't need to be apprised of everything going on. Like the world's gonna continue without me,
Yep.
and just because I'm not keeping up to date with everything that's happening politically, it's okay.
It's okay.
I'm
It's
gonna be fine.
okay.
The world's gonna be fine.
It's
Well, I
a
don't
lot
know.
to
We'll see
unplug.
about the world being fine, but
It'll
I'll
be
be fine.
fine. It'll be fine. Um, yeah, it's important for the mental health, especially right now. You're right, and I hope other people are doing that. Um, but I'm ready to talk about some food styling.
Cool. I want to talk about more hip hop, but we'll do that at some other point. But I will say,
Okay.
peep this Busta Rhymes. It's like, you know, it's always when the vets come back and do something, I'm always like a little nervous. Like, oh, what? How are they're gonna try to keep it old school? Or they gonna try to like non-cornily kind of adopt some of the current musical aesthetic and make it theirs? And I feel like he does a nice blending of like is Busta Rhymes, but
Yeah,
the energy and the kind of aesthetic feels fresh and new. So you can tell he put a lot of thought into it. So you
he's
got to
good at
check it
that.
out.
He's good at that. Busta Rhymes is the um only MC that I know who has literally had different um like moments in time since I was like 14 years old. Like
Hmm.
if you include Leaders of the New School time to like now, like remember he hit us in like the early 2000s with Janet, gonna make it.
Oh
Like
yeah.
like there has never been an era that he's missed where he didn't make a comeback. So I'm not at all surprised. I'm not shocked if my mind's gonna be blown at
No
all.
doubt. No
Hmm.
doubt. Well, I want to get into some just specifics, some nuts and bolts. We want to know about everything food styling from you. But
Okay.
before we get there, because as I was reading your bio, I was just reminded that a lot of the work that I want to move into with this
Hmm.
new phase in 2021, with a lot of different things I have bubbling, you've been doing that. And, yours has been very specific in terms of like, correct me if I'm wrong, but have you mostly been thinking about mentoring women in terms of like being in the kitchen, or has it been expanded and thinking about the many other fields that you might find in food media? Yeah, tell
Um,
us about that.
that's a good question. I think just because in the beginning when I started She Chef, I was really just kind of like creating a footprint from what I was doing, so like anytime because I was always freelancing in New York, and anytime like a project would be over, or for me, I felt that my time had expired because maybe I was on to the next thing, I would always try and fill that spot with another person who looked like me, man or woman, to be honest, but I knew mostly women. So, I think just by circumstance, it turned out that it was leading women to food styling because that's kind of just what I was doing,
Mm,
right? Different types of food styling because what food styling means for different companies, different entities, different media outlets, it varies, right? So, like, it looks different in every single place, but I think just by circumstance, I was always filling food stylist positions, if you will,
hmm hmm.
or at least the kinds of positions that would prepare one to be a food stylist.
Right. Okay.
Hmm.
So you got your master's degree in food
Hmm.
styling, right?
I wish I could have gotten a master's degree in food styling. I did get my master's in entertainment business, which was extremely helpful,
Hmm.
because I don't think if I had gone into a culinary media without having had like some background knowledge of what it takes to make media exist, I would have definitely undersold myself.
Hmm.
I probably would have missed out on a lot of opportunities because it wasn't in plain sight, like sometimes things are hidden in plain sight. And
Yeah.
so if I didn't know like the background things about media, I would have passed up on a lot of things that I didn't know was like under the actual offer.
Hmm.
So I think, not that I would say one must get that to be successful, but having that master's in entertainment business has really done me well.
Yeah. So, I was being tongue in cheek about you having your master's in food styling, but
Yes.
okay, so I want to be a food photographer. I want to be a food stylist. I want to be a prop
Hmm.
stylist. Like, these aren't necessarily things that you can major in. Like, even in, with photography, you go to
Yeah.
art school, you can major in fine art photography or
Hmm.
commercial photography, but you're not necessarily learning the skills that are very specific and unique, that craft for food styling. Can you
Right.
talk about, like, how does one even like get into this kind of cloistered world of food media? These kind of like what I talk about is below. I mean, I often describe them because people describe them as like below the line positions. I feel like they should be above the line because without these folks,
Right.
a lot of this sumptuous, sensual, beautiful, and delicious and tantalizing food that we see wouldn't be there. So just talk
Hmm.
about like how do people break into these kind of fields?
Okay, so I can't necessarily speak to, of course, the entire experience because it definitely varies from person to person. But some of the things that I think that most food stylists have in common is that um, they have apprenticed with other working food stylists, right? Um, Now, it's very interesting that you asked that because I think for me, I never consider myself an artistic person. Like, I really can barely draw a stick figure. Like, I don't draw very well. Um, so I never considered myself an artist. But food styling came very natural to me, right? Because I did go to culinary school. So I would say I think that going to culinary school, having some sort of culinary training is a prerequisite for food styling because in order to work with food over long periods of time in certain conditions, such as lots of lighting, so, a myriad of elements, right? You have to be able to know how food behaves in all the ways. So having like an actual knowledge of how food works is key to being a successful food stylist. I honestly believe that. So first things first, some sort of culinary training, even if it's just like online, a trade program, something, learn how food works
Mm-hmm.
as a science.
Mm-hmm.
Then, and also a part of me thinks that you either kind of have it or you don't, right?
Hmm.
It's very niche in that way. Even with food photography, it's kind of like you just kind of have an eye for it or you don't. Like
Hmm.
sure, food photographers can do other photography as food stylists can probably do other food jobs,
Yeah.
but like that particular niche is kind of like a you have it or you don't. Because
Hmm.
I am to go to a restaurant and get a beautiful plate is very different from what I do for food styling. I don't like
Hmm.
plating food. I'm not really good at it.
Hmm.
I plate food like your grandma. Plop the potatoes on, plop the chicken on, plop the vegetables on, eat the food, right? Because I feel like for eating, not that it doesn't have to look beautiful, but like food in and of itself is beautiful. So at home plating, I just rarely do that.
Hmm.
But chefs are trained to plate well, right? Like that's kind of like their thing. But you could ask the same chef who plates very well to style food for a commercial, and they might not be able to do it.
Hmm.
They could give you something that probably looks good, but like how to make this thing not just look good for 5 minutes, but how do you make this burger look good for 5 hours?
Hmm. Hmm.
How do you do that? And that's just not really their wheelhouse. They make food look good for immediate consumption, and that's important. So definitely apprenticing with a food stylist. I did that by like reaching out to food stylists on what's the like kind of like job site?
LinkedIn?
LinkedIn. Yep.
Hmm.
I reached out to some food stylists on LinkedIn.
Wait, so were you doing just cold calls, or did you have relationships with these folks?
I definitely did cold calls once I learned what food styling was, how I kind of learned about. So here's a perfect example of how food styling is different in one place than in another. I learned about food styling because when I started interning at the Food Network after culinary school, everyone who worked on food that went on their TV shows was called a food stylist.
Hmm.
Not everyone actually styled food per se, but like they all worked with the food that was on TV, which meant that they were responsible for finding the best looking fruit, the best looking vegetables, turkeys that were similar size, similar shape, all the things that kind of make like food TV magic happen. They were trained in that way. However, when I got my first offsite of Food Network food styling gig, I was an assistant for a food stylist. I had a
Hmm.
friend who was doing it, but went out of town and passed the gig over to me. And I learned that what food styling was for a magazine, because this food stylist worked for Martha Stewart Living.
Hmm.
So how she did food styling was very different than what I was doing at the Food Network. So I really had to be walked through it. But as I think about it now, she probably was so frustrated that she had me because I didn't know a damn thing. But she taught me, like we're styling we're styling chicken noodle soup that has vegetables. Um, the recipe is from scratch. I need the vegetables to be cut medium dice. I need the chicken to be poached before we even, like how to cook this food so that it lasts long on the camera and so that it looks like um, proper, like a beautiful packaging for a product,
Hmm.
And so, I learned all the tricks of the trade by apprenticing with her. Shout out to Eliza Journal. I worked with three at a time. So that's how I kept money coming in. Like I
Hmm.
always had a job because I was working with three stylists at a time. And they all have very different styles.
Hmm.
Liza used to carry a literal toolbox, like those big utility toolboxes full of tools for food styling. I mean, everything you could think of, from like three types of glue to five types of skewers to, I mean, things you never would think of. Rubik's Cube, I don't know, just everything. And she had it all in that toolbox. And I thought, wow, that's what a food stylist kit would look like. But as I started to work with other stylists, I'm noticing every stylist has a different kit. I
Hmm.
worked with a guy named Matt. Matt's food styling kit was literally like a little box, you
Hmm.
know,
Hmm.
and and I'm like, oh, okay, so you don't necessarily need all these tools, but I could see why one might want to have them all. But you
Hmm.
just learn different things from different stylists, and from that you start to like create your own identity in food styling.
Is Can I ask you a question? Is there a
Hmm.
correlation? Because I imagine that doing food styling for cookbooks that might want the food to look more natural
Hmm.
is quite different than doing the food styling for commercial shoots for
Hmm.
corporations. And I'm wondering, can you just talk a little bit about the difference between those? Because I know that just from my limited knowledge of food styling, on many of those commercial shoots, you might be using a lot of things that are actually inedible in order to make the supposed product look
Hmm.
beautiful, pop, whatever. And I know some people have kind of an ethic where they don't like doing that, or they may not do that. They may do it in some contexts, but not in others. Can you just talk a little bit about just the kind of different types of food styling
Hmm.
and what that might require?
um I mean, I would say a good food stylist will use whatever they need to
Mm-hmm.
get the product, the end result for the client.
Mm-hmm.
What the food looks like is definitely an expectation that is set by the client, right? Whoever they may be. Um, and also the brand, like some brands have a very rustic appeal from the beginning, right? Like um strange example, but a good one is like if you're doing food styling for a dog food commercial, because a lot of dog food commercials talk about how their dog food is made with real beef, real
Mhm.
this, real that, right? So you would have real food in the commercial or on the label of the can, and you're shooting that. Usually those are a little rustic, like they kind of have a little rustic feel for it. The cuts don't have to be precise because we're saying this stuff gets ground up to make dog food, right?
Right.
So, like that kind of moves into like what is the story the food is trying to tell, right? So
Mhm.
like um if you're food styling for Martha Stewart Living perchance, or some other magazine that is probably entertaining centric, then those will be more clean food styling shoots because everything is supposed to look perfect, and there are 24 pieces of this canapé for your guests. you
Mhm.
know um, the style of the food is really depending on what you are helping your client sell. So
Mhm.
like Food 52 became really well known for like their rustic styling when they first came out. Like it was like very rustic, pies on like burlap tablecloths, linen napkins. They really actually kind of made that like rustic overhead um, view of a shot really popular.
Mhm.
But they were an independent entity, so they could decide for themselves what style or feel they wanted for their shoot. So you just really, I mean, how food looks really is strongly determined by the story that you're trying to tell. If you're a blogger, you're usually showing people how to cook something.
Mhm.
So like what you want is for people to go follow your recipe. So it's just really important that your food looks immaculate,
Mhm.
like you are seasonally specific. um it just all depends on like what is our mission with this food today. Are we telling a story? Are we looking for people to want to cook our recipe? Are we even doing step shoots is what we call step shoots, when you're showing someone how to make a recipe and you're photographing every single step. um, if you're saying this is a rustic tart that my grandmother taught me how to make, then the chops, of course, are not going to be perfect. And the dough is not going to be a perfect cylinder. It's going to look like your grandmother told you this recipe and you have it by rote memory and you made it.
Mhm.
What's the story? How food looks depends on the story that you're telling and selling.
Mhm. Mhm. I love that.
Hmm.
Can you talk a little bit about just like what does life look like for the assistant to a food stylist? I think there are some people who are interested in moving in that field, and I know that the labor of a
Hmm.
food stylist and a food stylist assistant are different. And can you talk a little bit about those differences?
Oh yeah. Well, as a food stylist assistant, um, I think I could walk you through a day and throw in different scenarios from different assisting days, right?
And I just want to tell everybody out there, we're going to have some time for some questions very soon. So if you have them, please type them into the comment section so we can
I
make
love the
sure that Elle
questions
sees the
part.
questions.
So okay, so I would sometimes get a text at about 6:30 a.m. because I know my call time is probably like 8 a.m. So I'll probably get a text at 6:30 from the food stylist that might say, stop at Dean and DeLuca, get us two coffees, get five danishes, get a bunch of bananas, get some bread, maybe get whatever you want, get some orange juice and some milk, right? So I start my day going to Dean and DeLuca, getting these items. A lot of food, a classy food stylist will provide a little breakfast for the team. And so Liza would always do that. So I would always go shop a quick fresh fruit, bread, cracker, cheese breakfast.
Mm-hmm.
I would lay it out when I got there.
Mm-hmm.
I would set up her food stylist tray, which is usually a quarter sheet tray
Mm-hmm.
lined with paper towel or a side towel with all her regular tools laid out, the tools that she will use no matter what,
Mm-hmm.
which was kitchen shears, some paint brushes, tweezers, glycerin, a little spray bottle, just her immediate tools that she will use no matter what she's styling.
Hmm.
So I would do her set tray.
Wait,
I
can
would,
we take a step back for
yeah.
a second?
Mm-hmm.
Would you, as the assistant, actually go and purchase the food that would be cooked on set that day?
Not it's that is actually the food stylist job. The food stylist will bring all the groceries, buy all the groceries, prep any food that needs to be done, that might be time sensitive, like the night before.
Because they
That's
want to
a
be the ones who's actually going through and
Yes,
like
that's a
inspecting everything. Yeah.
that's a perfect question. So right after I would go to Dean and DeLuca, I would then come to Liza's house where I would help her grab all the things that we need for the shoot for the day. We would load up the car and then we would go to client site, whatever studio that was. We would get into the studio. I would set up the breakfast, set up her tray and a cooking station for her, whether she would use it a lot or not. Set up a prep station for me and whatever tools I need, which for me was kind of like my knife kit, my tweezers, things like that, things that I had started to learn that I need in order to do my job.
Yeah.
um, and set everyone up, and then I would start cooking. So she would usually have like a prep list for me, things I need to cook, instructions on how she wanted it to look, and I would do those things. And we would usually split the list within a day. Most shoot days are about 6 to 8 recipes. So we do 4 in the morning, we'd have lunch, and then do 4 in the afternoon. So she would usually have, and as an assistant, it's not guaranteed that this will happen, but the food stylist will usually have whatever's first up for the day completely ready so that in the morning you're starting on the next dish to shoot and you're always one dish ahead, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that's kind of your job as a food stylist, is to always make sure, assistant is to make sure that your food stylist is ready for the next thing immediately, whether it's an immediate transition or not, to have everything ready, and to even be intuitive, watching what the food stylist is doing if they allow you that time. And then asking, being very communicative, even if it means asking the same question a few times.
Yeah.
Like, how do you feel about where you are now? How much time do you think we have between the next shot so you can know how to be ready? Sometimes, as an assistant, some of your time is filled with things that kind of might seem insignificant. I remember one time having to, and this was for a cereal shoot for Kellogg, cornflakes, and I had to spend the first 4 hours of my day sorting through 4 or 5 economy size boxes of cornflakes for the perfect cornflake.
Wow.
Yeah, a cereal bowl's worth of perfect cornflakes, right? Certain dimensions, certain looks, And when you're dealing with product shoots like that, it's very likely that could happen. I did a shoot for Driscoll's Berries some years ago, and Driscoll literally sent us, I mean, I can't even, there's no number, 28, 35 flats of every berry: strawberry, blueberry, raspberry, blackberry, about 35 flats of each shipped from California, just to make sure that we were able to get the right berries,
Mm.
because like there are certain prerequisites to be called the perfect berry, and we had to have enough of them to do what we were going to do for 4 days.
Mm-hmm.
So sometimes your time is spent doing something that you think makes absolutely no sense or is irritating. But when you see the shot, you're like, wow, that was worth it. So
Yeah.
you get through the day, you end the day, you kind of start cleaning, any food that's left over, we put for everyone on the team to take. You can take what you want. Stylists will take what they want. That's the perk, coming home with food. And then you clean up the kitchen to get it the way it was before you got there, and then you go home. And you might maybe come back the next day and do it again, depending on how long your shoot is.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Can you share a moment where you felt like you were starting to hit your stride, where you were like, I'm ready. I think I'm ready to pivot from assistant to like full on stylist. Like, do you remember such a moment?
You know what? I honestly, I never had that moment. I got my first food styling gig from a food stylist that I apprenticed with, and it was probably, if I had to guess, it probably was like a smaller client that wasn't offering. the kind of money that she felt was worthwhile for giving up a day, or maybe it was a conflict of scheduling. I don't know, but I would imagine it was something like that. And she didn't offer it to me directly. She gave my name to the person who was hiring, and they called me and asked me if I was available. And that was really how I got my first shoot, you know,
Hmm.
like, and at that time I hadn't worked with her for almost 6 months at that point. Like she had a tendency to bring on new assistants all the time, you know, which was so smart and good because you learn different people's personalities, and you know that certain people can work on certain types of shoots, right? Like
Mm.
I have a pastry person that I work with all the time because I'm not that pastry savvy. And so I take her with me all the time, you know, but
Mm.
then I have someone for whatever, right? So you get to know people and what they're really good at. But yeah, my first gig was I was gotten in that way, and even when they called me, and even though I said yes, I was nervous boots. I was nervous down, honey. I was like, oh my God, I don't know. I've never done this before, and I didn't know what to do. But I
Question
figured it
is,
out.
did you have an assistant that day, or were you solo?
Oh, I was definitely solo. I did
Mm.
not have an assistant at all. But it was the probably I think I'd have to say it probably was the kind of shoot where I didn't wouldn't really need one, you know, like something that was that simple. But back in the day when I was assisting, assistants got paid $350 a day, which is peanuts right now.
Hmm.
But you know, to be getting something more than 300, like getting twice my pay, you know, I was like, what? Was I even getting twice my pay then? And I think maybe I was getting two, sometimes 300. So like getting a check for $600 for food styling was like, whoa, it was a big
Hmm.
deal, you know?
Hmm.
Um, and so no, I didn't have an assistant, but I started getting more calls. Like I would work with a company or client, and they would enjoy my work and call me back, you know, and that's really how it goes. Like I have to this day, I have annual clients, you know, who always call me to do their holiday things, and um you know it's that's you know your reputation is really it really precedes you. Like I never in the 8 years in New York City of food styling, I never had a business card to give, not one. I don't even think I could afford a business card, but
Hmm.
I never had one. All my work was always word of mouth, and people always thought that was pretty fantastic. I thought it was pretty miraculous, you know. um but you know, soon I started to um you know, the more experience I got, like working at the Chew, um, I started meeting younger, you know, women, and just, you know, like, hey, you know, I got this org called She Chef, you know. I don't really have a whole lot of structure right now, but if you like what you're doing here, you know, I could train you to do it for other people in other places. You want to do that? And they're like, yeah,
Hmm.
yeah, for sure, you know. And I'm like, you'll have to wake up this early and you can make more money. And they're
Hmm.
like, yes, you know. So, you know, just that's kind of how She Chef started. And I started getting assistants and mentoring people and teaching them, you know, bringing them with me on shoots when I would go, and literally be teaching them as we were working, you know.
Hmm. Hmm.
Yeah.
Have you just kind of like scanning the field? Um, have you seen an increase in BIPOC food stylists over the past 8 years, or what's that looking like in terms of like who's out there?
I wouldn't I wouldn't say an increase. I mean, maybe now. I think maybe just now I'm seeing an increase. Like I'm seeing, like I can finally say I know more than three black women food stylists. You know,
Hmm.
I still don't know any black men who are food stylists. I know I saw a brother comment um in the post that you did for this talk that we're having, and he was like, if I'd have known about this, my career would have taken a whole nother path. If he's in here, reach out. I'm gonna tap into him, you know, because he can still do it, you know. Like it's the great thing about it is usually not the kind of job that you do Monday through Friday every day of the week for a month, you know.
Hmm.
Like it's really the kind of job where if times are really, really good, you can have like 4 or 5 clients a month and be set financially. You'd be
Hmm.
Gucci, bills paid, rent paid, you know, like if you do it right, you know. And it's like, it's not something that really consumes you. I mean, and if it does consume you, it's only for that short amount of time, like
Hmm.
only for a 4 day shoot, maybe 6 days you're fully consumed. Your prep day and your the day where you fill your clients, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then when it's done, you know, and that's really the great thing about food styling. Like it never is like all consuming. And you choose your clients. Like if it
Mm-hmm.
works for you, you say yes. If it doesn't work for you, you pass it along, you know, tell them not me, but here's who, you know. It's a pretty dynamic line of work, and I definitely want to see more people of color in it. So I've been, you know, thinking of ways to do that.
For sure. Do you where you've had to deal with bias or just people's stuff for younger people or people who are just entering the field?
Hmm.
Because it's something that Kwame Onwuachi and I talked about when his memoir came out, and I interviewed him in San Francisco, in Berkeley at the Berkeley Bay Area Book Festival, and we talked about just how a lot of times he had to bite his tongue. He had to just kind of
Hmm.
like, you know, keep whatever that Malcolm X energy, just like keep it at bay because he had a mission and he wanted to improve his craft. And a lot of times that meant that
Hmm.
he couldn't, you know, just wild out on someone. So I don't know if you have any tips or thoughts about just confronting the stuff that we often
Hmm.
have to confront when we're out in the world.
I would say in food styling, my number one advice to people is to never take the critique personally,
Mm-hmm.
right? Because this is the one time where the work that you're doing, like whether you like it or not, kind of really doesn't matter, if that makes sense, right? The work you're creating is for the client, it's for the brand identity that they have already established for whatever it is that they're selling. And all you have to do is create something that matches that. You don't have to love it. I've walked away from many things saying like I didn't love it, but it matches the aesthetic, you know,
Yeah.
like I don't I think the brand identity sucks across the board. But um, you know, so as it relates to the work, you know, just remember like, you know, you are the food stylist, they are the client, but the consumer is really the boss, right? If the
Hmm.
consumers love it, then you do it. You know what I'm saying? So it's like, you know, keeping that in mind. Now, as in terms of like having to bite my tongue or, you know, or feel like I had to hold back on something, I can't say I have ever had that experience where I feel like as a woman of color, a black woman, that I've had to kind of bite my tongue. I mean, like with food styling, if I feel like I need to check you, then I'm gonna check you. Because listen, this might be our last time working together or not, and that depends on them. Because they could love your work and still never call you back, you know. So it's
Hmm.
really not worth ever having to bite your tongue if
Hmm.
something arises and you feel disrespected, or you know, if you feel like if your instinct tells you, your gut tells you, your heart tells you you need to say something,
Hmm.
then you respond, you know. And you know, it's like, who cares? You choose them, they choose you. I mean, just like they could go into the world of media and say, "Oh, I didn't enjoy working with Elle Simone." You very well could do the same. You know, you could go out into the world and say, "You know what? I didn't like working with this photographer. I felt he was very brash and rude." You know, so I think one of the things that I've noticed in the field is that there's not a whole lot of like this and this, right? Because we may have bumped heads, but we really don't want the rest of the world to know that we bumped heads, right? We can
Hmm.
just agree to disagree and never work together again. But no, neither one of us wants a bad reputation in the industry,
Yeah, I
right?
love that.
But I remember one time I was food styling for Carla Hall. We were doing nope, it wasn't Carla's shoot. We were in the same studio as this shoot. I was doing cooking channel, Roger was Roger Moonen and someone else. Oh, Artie, um, Indian sister. But they were doing a holiday special, and I was doing my food styling thing. I'm in the back kitchen and I'm cooking. And it wasn't even really like a back kitchen. It's like a studio apartment, and there's a kitchen in there. And so funny. I watched a movie the other day, and one of the scenes was in that apartment, and I was like, I know where that is. But anyway, the director kept coming in the kitchen asking me what was for like breakfast. What's for breakfast? European cat. What's for breakfast? What's for lunch? I finally had to tell him, like after the third time, I was like, sir, I am the food stylist. I am not crafty. I don't know what's for lunch. You need to talk to
Mm.
your assistant about that. Don't ask me about lunch again. Don't ask me about another meal. You want this food styling? I got it right here. Right? He got out of that kitchen so fast, so sometimes, it's our typical black and brown people problem. Like people in professional settings, if we have an all black, people think we're the goddamn waiters, or we're the help, and there's nothing wrong with being the help. There's nothing wrong with that. But like, don't assume I'm something because of how I appear. It's
Yeah.
rude and it's
Yeah.
racist, and stop it. So,
Yes, yes. All right, let's get to some of these
oh,
questions.
okay.
Well, CB_Z writes, how do you find assistant opportunities?
CB, I went to LinkedIn. Now we have beautiful Instagram. You can follow the hashtag Food Stylist, and you can find, usually if you put like Food Stylist Chicago, they'll pop up in your area, whatever city you're in. You can go to LinkedIn. Google is your friend. Find food stylists in your area and send them your resume, send them a letter, not just like the cover letter that comes with your resume that just says some generic stuff. You should be really specific about your interest in learning food styling. If you have some photos of things that you've done at home or otherwise, you should include those. And even if you don't get the response that you want, I think it's very important. And this is kind of what I did. It felt like hazing, but anytime I would do something new or get a new project under my belt, I would email those same people and say, hey, I hope you're doing well. I'm still looking for assistantship if you need it. Here's some new projects I've worked on. My skills are developing. Reach out if you need me. And just keep doing that. And eventually people will reach out. I mean, it's hard. Good help is hard to find. So if you really feel you have an eye or a skill, or talent for that, just keep reaching out, show your work, and someone will call you.
Yeah. And I have to say, as someone who gets dozens of emails every day, if someone doesn't hit you back, it may be that they're just like overwhelmed with emails and you just got to bump it up to the top of their inbox.
Yep.
So
Don't
I don't,
email on Fridays.
oh, no, no, no.
Don't ever
I even
email.
say don't email on Mondays.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Tuesday through Thursdays are good times to send emails.
Hmm.
I mean, I'm so glad that Google has this new setting where like if no one has responded in a few days, you can like bump it up to the top of their inbox. Use that. And also sometimes volunteer. I mean, I know it's hard to say, especially in the time right now where everybody needs money, but volunteering your time shows that you're serious about it. Not
Hmm.
every time, but sometimes.
All right. Second question from Flights and Foods. Flights and Foods. Okay. How long might the journey be from culinary education to food stylist assistant?
I mean, I think these days it could be really short. Um, I think it might benefit you to actually work with some food in a restaurant setting at least a little bit. Um, just because it helps you to understand the timeliness in which food needs to happen oftentimes, like that hustle and bustle of restaurant cooking, even if it's prep chef, like it helps you to respect the time in which food needs to be done because that's something that doesn't change as a food stylist. Like you still have to be precise with your time. Timing is everything, and if you're like me and you're a food stylist who actually likes to use the food that I've been shooting or, so that people can eat it, you need to know how to safely be handling food. So I would say give yourself a year, 6 months to a year of like working in your field, in the culinary industry. And in the meantime, be searching out for food stylists who want to teach.
So Sans 13 or maybe it's Sans L 3, I'm not sure, but
Mhm.
they write, I want to hear a story where everything went wrong.
I mean, that can be any given day. Like I don't have any one story. Like sometimes you burn the food, because you're doing 15 things. Sometimes the size steak you bought is smaller than they thought or thinner than they thought, like sometimes the butcher don't get your order right and you don't know until you go and pick it up. Like I could go on and on, like a million things. You could break the cake on the way to set and have to bake a whole nother cake, and you have to push your first thing, because if you were going to shoot that cake first, which most people would do, then you got to push that cake all the way to the end of the day, like I mean, there's just no one story. Like something can go wrong all the time. You could forget your kit. You leave your phone in the car. One time, I locked my keys in the house while I was loading the car. And then I had to wait for a locksmith. Anything, if it can't go wrong, it will go wrong. Always be prepared. That's all I got. Have a kit inside your kit, something like that. Yeah.
Well, on that note, Donna0919 writes, have you ever had an experience with a shoot where you could not make the food/dish aesthetically pleasing?
Yes. Yes. Because um, sometimes clients see something that is digital and probably extremely manipulated digitally. Like sometimes when they can't make the food do something in real life, the digital team can like make it look different. And they're not transparent about the challenges that may have come with that particular thing, or sometimes people are not transparent about the challenges that come with a recipe, right?
Mm.
Because a lot of food styling comes from recipes that come from another source or person. And so if the recipes aren't tested well, I might be digging my own grave by saying this right now, but if recipes are not tested well, then when it's time for the food stylist to cook it, to make it, you're gonna come up short, So like being honest is so important, and it's not a knock to the person who wrote the recipe, but like we're all a team. And even if we're disconnected, even if you never meet the chef that wrote the recipe, but you are the recipe tester, it is your responsibility to be honest with that chef or recipe creator to say, hey, this doesn't work. Let's figure out how to make it work. I know what you're trying to do. Let's figure out how to do it. So that when it comes to the food stylist and you're getting ready to do the book cover or the magazine cover or whatever, the food stylist has a real thing to work with. If we don't, we will fake it. We will fake the funk 100%. We will get it. But sometimes it's just not possible. And you have to just be honest with the client. Like, this is what you asked for, right? This is what I have. This was my source of delivery. And then they just make a decision. Sometimes it's not personal. It's not you as a food stylist always. Sometimes it's just the way it goes. And then they have to make a decision. Do we keep it? Do we scrap it?
Mm-hmm.
It happens. It does happen.
Well, Elle, we really appreciate you taking time to sit with us, answer these questions, tell us more about your career journey. Um, I think this is a fitting question to take us out. Are you
Hmm.
back filming America's Test Kitchen in Cook's Country?
Yes, Hunty. We actually just filmed. I know people are asking because I've been kind of transparent about my health journey right now, but we have filmed. I film TV in my home. All of us, all the talent at ATK, we all filmed from our homes. So you're just gonna get me in January. There's no Bridget, there's no Julia. It's all me. It's the Elle show. So let me know what you think. But the walk-in is happening. The walk-in, my podcast. I really would love it if you guys would just go and subscribe. And you don't have to leave a review. You could just click the hearts if you like it. But if you listen, I think it's really going to be great. Brian is a guest. There are lots of other really great guests. Tell your friends, share the word. And I am going to be launching some food styling. I might do a little conference or some modules or something in 2021. I'm gonna teach y'all some ins and outs of food styling. So keep your eyes open for that.
Cool, cool, cool. All right, Elle, thank you. Have a great weekend. Everybody, thank you for joining us. Thank you, Kaiser, for funding us. And
Yeah.
we'll see you next week. Next week, we're going to be having Brooklyn Borough President Eric Adams is
Oh,
going to be joining us, talking about his book, Healthy at Last. And Elle, before we go out, where can people find you? Tell us where to go check out your work, your stuff, whatever you got popping.
Okay, so you can find any of my America's Test Kitchen episodes on YouTube. You can also subscribe to americastestkitchen.com if you so choose. If you have kids, it's for free. You can find me at L underscore Simone Scott here on Instagram. You can also check us out at She Chef Inc. That's one word, She Chef Inc. here on Instagram. And if you listen to podcasts, and if you don't, you can start. You can find me at Spotify, iTunes podcast, Stitch, anywhere you listen to podcasts. I'm on all the platforms. So dig in.
Word, word.
Yeah.
All right. We out. Have a great weekend.
All right, you too. Thanks, everybody.